Should be going. Hi, how are you, Lisa Marie?
Hi, Lisa. I'm good, thanks.
Good to see you. Welcome to Collective Thinking Live, everyone. It's back. We've had a bit of a break and we're absolutely delighted to be back today for Stress Awareness Month. For those who don't know me, I'm Lisa. I'm founder of the Wentworth Collective, and we are a global event management consultancy, designing and delivering exceptional experiences that have lasting impact for our clients. And today I am delighted to welcome Lisa Marie Sikand, who I've known, I think now for over a decade. She's a good friend of mine, now co-collaborator, was a former client of mine when she used to work for a global law firm as their EMEA CMO. And Lisa Marie and I sort of bonded over our shared experience of burnout, actually, which we'll talk about in greater detail during this conversation. And personally, I mean, I work in the events industry. It's quite a stressful industry. And I sort of had my own experience of burnout about 8 years ago when I returned to work, having had 2 children. And it sort of floored me, really. I was that mum in the playground with 2 phones in my hand, not knowing if I was coming or going, and actually reaching rock bottom helped me bounce back up. And I've sort of since then personally never wanted to go through that again. And when Lisa Marie we spoke about our shared experience, we sort of were quite evangelical about it now, I'd say, in hoping that people don't experience it again. So this isn't about me. This is about Stress Awareness Month and bringing stress and how it can be a positive thing for people and how you can use it to your advantage. And so without talking any more about my story, I'm going to hand over to you, Lisa Marie, just to, first of all, how are you?
Thanks, Lisa. I'm good. I am delighted to be here. Stress Awareness Month is a really important global movement to help normalise the conversation around stress and the impacts of stress. A lot of the narrative is very much around how stress is bad for you, and whilst I don't disagree with that at all, and it's important to say I am not medically qualified, so everything I talk to today is very much about my own personal experience and that of my clients that I can share with permission as my experience being an executive and business coach and helping people to manage the pressures that they face. And we're going to take a look at actually how stress can be a positive thing and can actually be quite motivating. I think it's probably fair to say that in the run-up to going live for this talk, there was a little bit of stress in the backstage room between you and I, and that's not necessarily a positive or a negative, it's just a fact of what's happening.
Yeah. So share with the audience just a little bit about your story today before we take a deeper dive into what stress is. And I do want to share, if people have any questions along the way, feel free to put them in the comments because then we'll answer them along the way.
Yeah, sure. This is very much your space. Come in and ask us questions. We're really keen to hear from you and understand what pressures and challenges and experiences you've had around stress too. Who am I? I am an executive and business coach. I've spent nearly 20 years in the professional services industry. About 16 of those years were spent at a global law firm going through significant growth and transformation. Almost 6 of those years were spent on the C-suite, and with that comes a ton of stress and pressure and experience. Moving in a fast-paced industry, a very traditional hierarchical industry, one where presenteeism and busyness is a badge of honour. I had a great time doing what I did for that time, but also came with it burnout. And that happened to me about 3 years ago. And it was a really transformational time in my life where I was forced to look at my core values and what I wanted to get out of life. And that really all came about when I was diagnosed with an acute stress disorder. And that really brings my passion for helping other people manage stress better into acute focus.
So what, just for those who don't know, how is acute stress disorder, how does it differentiate from other disorders, or say anxiety or burnout? What's the main difference between acute stress disorder?
Acute stress disorder, or my experience of it, basically was experiencing chronic stress at the same time as a major life event happening.
Right.
Fairly unbelievably, I had 3 major life events happen within a sort of 4 to 6 week period. Pretty unprecedented, and that created significant distress in my life. And the way in which that stress shows up when it's chronic is through anxiety, unhappiness, distraction, poor sleep, and a number of other different ways. And chronic stress is very much when stress is ever present in your life. It could be to do with a job, it could be to do with a relationship. Whereas other types of stress, which we're typically more familiar with, will be deadline driven. Something like a house move, an illness. And some of those stresses are distressing, and others of them are eustressing. And eustressing actually is positive stress. So it's where you have adrenaline, excitement. It could be a positive life event, such as getting married, getting a promotion, getting a pet, anything that creates a significant life change, but equally something that you've chosen to have happen. Stress is a pretty typical response to life events and the demands and pressure that get placed on us. It's when stress becomes unmanageable or chronic that it tends to cause significant issues within our life.
Okay. So just, you touched upon there how, you've spoken about what stress is, and obviously we've gone on to the extreme state of acute stress disorder. But, like we were saying before, when we were a bit, say, stressed in the green room beforehand, like, how can stress be motivating? Like, how can you make stress work for you?
So stress typically creates a sense of urgency. So when there's a deadline, for example, we get really focused on achieving what it takes to get to that deadline. If you think about it from your industry perspective, the events industry, it would be the adrenaline of going live on an event. It's an excitement, and it tends to be something that drives us to respond. Awareness builds around what it takes to get back into control when you're feeling stressed, and you tend to clear out all of the distractions. So rather than focusing on absolutely everything that's on your to-do list, you will clear away everything that is not related to achieving that particular deadline. It also helps you to recognize your limits and to know that there's only a certain amount of achievement you can create within a given time, for example. So you might decide to prioritize certain things, delegate other things, stop doing, start doing. It really gives you that laser focus to get back into control and achieve what's in front of you. It also helps us to problem solve, because what we're doing is we're forced to act. And if we think about using stress as a motivator, it can come in those times of reflection where we're thinking, okay, I've got this deadline coming up. What am I going to do to hit it? And then your adrenaline goes up, your level of responsibility heightens, and your focus intensifies. And so in those moments, the stress is actually helping us to achieve what really matters. What tends to happen is we over-focus on things that are beyond our control and allow them to stress us out. And so if we think about how to make stress work for us better, it's by understanding how we can use stress to put us back in control and focus on the things which really make a difference.
So what I'm hearing then, it's sort of stress, if used in a good way, you can sort of channel it to your advantage because it forces you to stay laser focused and for you to prioritize what your to-do list is. But what if, for example, and I'm sure the audience can understand, and we've all been there, you're in the reeds and you haven't got that laser focus? You know, what if, say, the stress gets too much? Because it sounds like in an idealistic world, that sounds great, but you sort of like have to have a clear mind to be able to say, okay, or identify, I am stressed. How do you know, what can you do how do you prioritize? How do you get to that point?
Well, there's a couple of different things going on there, right? It's how do you prioritize? That's a what do you call it? It's a I can't think of the word, but basically learning how to prioritize is a habit in which anyone can adopt. And there's different methods in how you might be able to do that. When you're feeling stressed, you're typically feeling overwhelmed.
Yeah.
I would challenge you on you don't know what to do, because if you had 10 different things on your to-do list and you knew that by 2 o'clock you needed to achieve 2 of those things, it's pretty clear that the thing that needs to be done by 2 o'clock needs to get done. That either means you've got to forget the other things, find an alternative solution for them, or deal with them later. And so when you're in that high stress moment, it's about taking yourself out of that situation and maybe having a conversation with somebody else about what's going on and just saying, look, I've got a 2 o'clock deadline. I've got these 3 things that need to get done. I'm thinking I might do this. What do you think? Can you help me figure this out? Or it might be taking yourself through that process and thinking, okay, I've got these 3 things that need to get done. I'm focusing on the 2 o'clock thing. I'm going to worry about the rest of it at 2:30. And immediately what you're doing is you're putting yourself back in control.
Yeah.
When you're continually stressed and chronically stressed, you may begin to not realize how bad things are because it becomes habitual. The lack of sleep is a regular thing. The moodiness or the isolation has become more frequent. You've stopped going out with your friends. You've missed deadlines. And sometimes it can actually take somebody else to point out to you what is going on for you, and just checking in and asking this really powerful question of, how are you? Most people, when you say to them, how are you, will say, fine. If you actually ask the question again, and this is proven, you will get a different response. The more you ask it, the deeper people tend to go. It's like, how are you? Have you ever had that scenario where you say to someone, how are you? And they say, fine. And then you say, no, how are you really? And you get that look. They may sink into their chair. They may burst into tears. And they may choose alternative language like, I'm not okay. I've just got so much to do and I don't know where to start. And that's when stress is paralyzing.
Yeah.
And, you know, part of the importance of this Stress Awareness Month is about normalizing the conversation and making it okay and dispelling this myth that being busy and being always on is not a badge of honor. Actually, it's the complete opposite. And that by looking after ourselves and getting ourselves back in control of stress and making stress positively work for us is really important.
Yeah.
If stress has become too much, we tend to see negative behavior. We might have body aches, we might get headaches, we may even get palpitations. We typically will find it difficult to concentrate. We may detach ourselves from our responsibilities, our relationships. We may feel a heightened sense of anxiety. When I went through my period of acute stress disorder, I experienced all of those things. And it built and it built and it built until it finally broke. And it was when the third life event happened where I was just like, I cannot deal with this anymore. But that roller coaster had been about to come off the rails for quite a significant period of time. And actually, had I put myself back in the driving seat of my own life, and had I had the courage to have difficult conversations, which were confronting and went beyond all of the good wellbeing practices, all of which that have a place in life, I would have had a different result. Things would have not got to the stage that they got to. And all of those wellbeing practices are really important. It's important we eat well, that we hydrate sufficiently, that we move our bodies on a regular basis, that we sleep, all of those things that, you know, we can use our own breath to get ourselves back in control of a situation. All of those are part of a stress management toolkit. But actually, what I see in my practice with clients, and what I really want to come out of our conversation today, is to reduce stress in our life, we have to go back to who we are at the core fundamentally. And we have to understand what are the things which are making our life more difficult. What are the hard conversations that we need to be having with others? What is the courageous act that we need to have with our boss, with our partner, with our aunt, parents, children, whoever it may be, to look at the deeper causes of our stress? Not this veneer level of I'm always expected, you know, to do X, Y, and Z, but also to go back within ourselves and say, what are my beliefs around what being successful looks like? So one belief that I held for a long time was that in order to be successful, you have to work very hard. I don't actually dispute that as a belief, and I still believe it, but my version of what hard looks like is different to what it used to look like. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. It does. So it sounds like, and we touched upon this, Lisa Marie and I did a talk last month about, you know, starting with yourself and, you know, having better work practices at work. But it sounds to me that there's a lot of self-inquiry, like you need to sort of dig deep and really find out where the stress is coming from and what the, you know, dig deep. And I think we spoke about this, especially for some people who carry on, like you were saying before with yourself as well, in your body. There's that book, isn't it? The Body Keeps Score, where the body keeps score. So it sort of like comes out, doesn't it, in your body, that stress. And I know that happened to me. I found that I had like terrible neck pains. On the face of it, I was high performing. I was getting on with it. But it wasn't until I had this awful crippling neck pain that actually I had to deal like, where's this coming from? And it was stress, and it was coming through when I was asleep at night. So I suppose these are the signs. How do you, and we were talking about this yesterday, we were running through the talk, how can you support people in sort of doing that self-inquiry? So what do you do when the stress gets too much? And like we were saying, you were in the reads and you sort of like need to have those difficult conversations. I mean, I think we spoke before that the first one is self-awareness, to know that there's a problem in the first place. But once you're there, what are the next stages then to, you know, to sort of get out of your own way, essentially?
Yeah, so the self-awareness comes in two parts, right? It's either somebody bringing something to your attention, say, for example, Lisa, look, I've noticed that you have a lot of neck pain and you're quite short lately. And then that opens up a dialogue, and that requires a trusted relationship, right? You're not just going to do that with somebody that you don't know and don't feel that comfortable doing that with. So bringing about that conversation and normalizing it is part of it. I think asking people how they really are, it is a pathway to helping somebody recognize that things may not be okay for themselves. But then also, if you know in yourself that things aren't okay, it's having that safe space to be able to explore that and understanding what that means. And what I see quite a lot in my practice is that people come to me because they want a change. They're either bored, frustrated, upset, disillusioned with their circumstances. And they may or may not have an idea as to where or what they want to have change, but they don't really know how to get there at that point. And that tends to be because they're overwhelmed with their own opinions and beliefs and the opinions and beliefs of others. And what we do in our work together is just really try and get them to uncover who they are at their core, like what really matters to them, and what would they do if they weren't afraid, which is actually a great book written by Michal Oshman, who is the head of culture at TikTok. It's a really powerful question, and one that I think everyone should answer for themselves, because it's energizing to do that. How can you help somebody get out of their own way? Well, there's 3 things that I believe in, and that is building your own self-awareness. So getting to know what your own blind spots are, because if you don't know them, then you can't expect other people to help you achieve what you want to achieve. It's about knowing yourself. The second one is about backing yourself. So it's about self-belief. Believe that change is possible. Believe in yourself to have the courage and the conviction to have that difficult conversation with your partner, your boss, your colleague, whoever, your child, it doesn't matter. But know that you are able to have that conversation and you are able to make the change that you desire. It doesn't mean it will necessarily be easy, but it's certainly possible. And then the final one is self-care, and that's about looking after yourself. So we've touched on, all of the good well-being practices you can make sure you put in place, but really they're about managing the symptoms of stress. And what I want us to explore more is, what are the true causes? What are your triggers? What is driving that chronic stress, which is typically job, relationship, not just personal relationship. It could be family, it could be friendship, it could be work related. But what is it about that, and how might you be able to look at that in different ways? The mind is a funny thing. It's a brilliant thing, but its main job is to protect you. And so in protecting you, it tends to seek out the risk and the danger in everything. And in doing that, we tend to have repetitive thoughts. On a daily basis, I think we have between 70 and 80,000 thoughts. And there's some evidence that suggests around 75 to 80% of our thoughts are repetitive. So if we're having 75 to 80% of our 80,000 thoughts being repetitive, and they're negative, and they're seeking out the danger because the mind hasn't evolved in the way that society and technology has evolved, then we're already in deficit in fighting with ourselves. And when you're feeling anxious and tense, unhappy, distracted, frustrated, irritated because you're having poor sleep, you're experiencing different types of stress manifesting itself in your body, either through the poor sleep, you're not taking good care of yourself, then it becomes much more difficult to take action. And to take that action, it feels much bigger. And so what it requires is it just takes one baby step to have a conversation and to have the courage when somebody next says to you, "How are you?" Say, "Well, things could be better, they could be different, or I'm finding this particular thing challenging," because the answers are there. They're there within you. You know that things aren't quite what you want them to be. But also, if you think about how stress has worked for you in the past, how it's got you to achieve that deadline, how it's helped you to build your resilience because you achieved something that you thought was outside of your control, or you thought was too difficult to achieve. You can build up that bank of knowledge and case study about yourself, about how actually stress has helped you achieve a deadline, become more aware of your possibilities and your abilities within yourself, and to problem solve. And that's what reflection can do.
So holding space to have that reflection, self-inquiry about what it might do. We have a question actually, Lisa Marie. I think you've answered it already, but I just want to make sure. It's from Katie Gosling. What would you suggest when you sense someone is stressed but they can't see it and there's a risk to them? How do you approach it with them?
I think it depends on your relationship, is the first thing I would say. And it depends on what you want the outcome to be of that conversation. Are you approaching this person because you're concerned about them and you want to help them? Is it because it's having a knock-on impact for others? Or is it because you can see that that risk is avoidable? And so by opening up that conversation, I would think carefully about choosing an appropriate time, environment, and language. You know, people respond very differently depending on your relationship with them. And you have to be prepared for the conversation to go a number of different ways. We have a tendency as humans to want to fix other people and offer unsolicited advice. What can be really helpful to people who are experiencing challenges and are feeling overwhelmed can be just listening. You know, as humans, when we communicate, we want to listen to respond. And actually, it's a tremendous talent to develop if we can just sit on our hands, close our mouths, and just let that person keep on talking and see where the conversation goes.
I hope that answered your question, Katie.
Thank you, Katie.
Thank you for that question. So we mentioned more about thoughts as well, that, you know, obviously we have lots of these thoughts that come into your head. You just touched upon before we answer the question. And I know that we talked about this before, that there are some other techniques, because sometimes we've spoken about taking control of stress, and how, you know, how we can, you know, take control of stress and use it to our advantage and use it to prioritize. And we spoke about when it can be overwhelming, but there's a technique that you talk about when maybe your thoughts are out of control and you can start spiraling. What's that? I think we talked about it was the 4 C's. Just explain.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's the 4 C's. It's catch it, catch the thought. Just acknowledge that it's even happening. Check it. What is this thought? Challenge it. Ask yourself, is there a different way in which I can look at this? Is this really the only way that this happens to be? And then to get yourself back in control, change it. It takes practice, like lots of things in life, like if we want to get better at sport or a language or any skill or habit that we want to develop, it takes practice. And by building that awareness and that consciousness around it, we can start to change our behaviour.
Yeah. And I think that's what we were talking about before. It's about having that self-awareness at the beginning and to be able to have that cushion of sort of removing yourself from the situation slightly and having that self-reflection and take. So when you are stressed, I suppose the tendency would be just to keep on going and keep on ploughing through. But actually, it will probably serve you better to take some time out. You know, I know sometimes, you know, when we're talking, you know, Lisa Marie and I are sort of accountability partners, we have regular check-ins. And sometimes if I am stressed, as well as, you know, supporting me on a business time, sometimes Lisa Marie, you'll say to me, like, have you gone outside and have a walk? And just changing your environment and taking some time to be reflective can help you as well, before it spirals out of control.
Absolutely. Like I said earlier, all of those wellbeing practices are super important. I know for me that a daily, I call them soul stroll, works really well for me because my perspective tends to shift when I get outside in Mother Nature and have a walk around, and I become much less reactive to things and I choose how I respond. But I want to bring it back to this point around recognizing your triggers and going deep into the true causes of your stress. So we might think my stress is caused because I'm so busy at work. Your stress is caused because of your disproportionate response to the events and demands being placed upon you. And so if you can understand yourself better, and for example, bringing it back to the events world, you know that in the couple of weeks running up to a major global conference, things are going to be very stressful. Recognizing what it takes in order for you to stay in control. And that could be that combination of good sleep, effective boundaries, giving yourself that playtime so that you are resting and nourishing yourself. And that could be going out and enjoying yourself with friends and others. But it's about going to what the true cause of this is and how you can put those practices in place, not just to manage the symptoms of stress, but actually to preempt what your stress triggers are using your prior experiences.
Yeah, that's powerful. We were saying, like, in the run up of an event, you can sort of like know that you'll have a stressful time, but schedule in some time afterwards, to cushion that stressful time, to have some relax, and nurturing stuff. Brendan Dwyer sent a comment. This is so relevant in today's working environment. The issue is that the majority of companies don't ask, how are you? Where are the results? Where are the results is a more typical question, but more and more recognition has been given to mental health. A happy and balanced person is more valuable to the company. And so the internal policies for staff's environment and entertain the conversation when needed is key.
So true, Brendan. And this is a very narrow window and lens for us to talk about stress management, and is obviously influenced by our own perspectives and our own experiences of burnout, both Lisa and I. I think for me, a missing part of today's conversation is talking about how to put those effective boundaries in place, and perhaps something, Lisa, that you and I can explore together another time. And to your point, Brendan, lots of companies exist for financial performance reasons and to build business results. There's no getting away from that. But I truly believe that this has been a season of change. I was reading a report over the weekend that 1 in 5 people have changed their career in the last 2 years in the UK alone. Now, some of that has been forced, but a lot of it has been due to a wakening up of outdated societal systems and structures, but also people using the experience of the last couple of years to really reflect on what works for them and what doesn't work for them. And the season has shifted, as I've said, and I believe that the employers that put people first and offer their organisation culture to be one which is led with that heart-centred leadership or that psychological safety are those that will be truly competitive in the future and will enjoy the most successful business results too.
No, absolutely. And just, we could talk about the subject for hours, and even now I'm thinking about other things to talk about, but it's always, we could for another time. So I think, just as we sort of, wrap up and close, we've spoken about good stress and having it and it being motivating. If that's, what's the sort of 3 takeaways that, that we would say, just to wrap up? We'd see if we're starting the managing stress journey, what would you say would be the most important things to manage or to tackle first? Because you can't tackle everything at the same time. What would be the most important, do you think?
Ask yourself the how are you question. Ask yourself it between 3 and 5 times and free write your responses. Because with the repetition, you'll tend, as I said earlier, to go deeper. And then take one area of your stress and choose to manage it differently. And by managing it differently, I don't mean adopting a good sleep pattern and going to bed at 10 o'clock every night from here on in. I mean having the courage to have that difficult conversation with whoever it may be. Because courage will move you places that many other actions won't.
Absolutely. And I think I would say, ask for help. If you're having that difficult conversation, have your cheerleader, have your coach to sort of support you and have it. That's a form of self-care in having that difficult conversation, that you've got someone who's got your back, basically, to support you and ask for help, essentially.
Yeah.
We're not in it
absolutely alone. Help is available.
Definitely definitely. Well, thank you so much, Lisa Marie. I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, and thank you everyone for their questions. If people want to find out more, they want to ask you some more questions, where can they find you?
They can hit me up on LinkedIn with a personal message, so I know what you're getting in touch about. That would be great. I'm on Instagram, which is my business handle, Solitude7, and via the Wentworth Collective. As Lisa mentioned, we are business collaborators. And if any of you have got outstanding questions or are watching this on replay and want to get some help with how to get out of your own way, please just do get in contact with me. It is my life's passion to help people get what they want.
Thank you so much. And everyone have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you.